Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 319. Today we're going to talk about Panamax. Now this is a new release from Stronghold Games, plays 2 to 4 players, and let's find out what the box says in terms of the time, 90 to 120 minutes, and that is definitely true. Now your first game probably is going to go longer than that, but once you play the game once or twice probably, then you're going to get the hang of it and you can easily play this in under 2 hours even with 4 players. So the theme of the game is a weird theme, honestly. You're trying to maneuver goods through Panamax and shipments and cargo, and not Panamax, the Panama Canal. Panamax is the size of the ship that will fit through the Panama Canal. So what you're trying to do is load goods and stuff, and each of you runs a shipping company that you can have stock in. You can buy stock in other people's companies. But unlike most stock games, you actually have your own company. Most stock games, you buy into pieces of companies, but you don't really start with a company. This one, you actually start with your own company that you're running, but you can still buy stock in other folks' companies. Now, say right off the bat, this is a very different kind of Euro than I think is at least recent, been released. So this is can be brutal. But I don't think in a sense that it punishes you and drags down the fun in any way, but it is a brutal game that you do have to play a few times to get the learns and the ins and outs of and all that kind of good stuff. So before I preamble too much, let's jump into how the game works a little bit, and then I'll kind of tell you what I think of it. I've got the board set up here for 4 players. I will make a quick comment that it is best with 3 and 4 players, but I do actually enjoy the 2-player game quite a bit. There's a couple of key areas on the board, and I'll just make quick note of those, and then we'll jump into what everything kind of does. The main area of focus throughout the entire game is going to be this action table that we see here. And you can see it's split into 2 sides. On the left-hand side, you can see it's got a blue background. All of the actions that you can take here are going to have to do with ship movement. On the right-hand side, we have sort of the cargo area. And here, when you take a die from this side, you'll be able to grab one of these cargo contracts, load cargo, or even pass if you choose. And a player's turn is simply going to involve grabbing one of the dice, either on the movement or the cargo area, and then taking the appropriate corresponding action. Now, as you take and remove dice, better dice are going to become available. So as you see here, as you remove dice from this center area here of the cargo, you can actually load more and more cargo. As the first dice is chosen, you can choose to load 1 cargo, then 2, and then 3. And depending on how the dice are rolled at the beginning of the round, you may reveal an executive action die. And this is going to give you a choice of doing the basic action, in this case like loading cargo, or manipulating the stock market a little bit. Depending on the number of players, you're going to roll a different amount of dice every round. There's 3 rounds in the game, and at the end of the game, the player's personal wealth is going to determine victory. Now, each player, as I said, is going to manage a company. You can buy stock in different companies, even your own company, and the company is going to have its own stockpile of money that you'll use to build ships and take other actions, but it's your personal wealth that is going to be the determiner of victory. The other thing to note is that as dice run out from either side of the action table, you can, if you want, spend $5 to take a die from one side of the action table to move it over to the other side. Each company starts the game with $18 unless you're playing the advanced mode, at which point you can auction off 4 shares in the company. In the basic game, each player is going to start with 4 shares on their player board, and they'll start with 1 share of their company in their possession, as well as $6 in personal money, as well as a built size 2 ship. They will have a size 3 and size 1 ship that's yet to be built on the company board. And depending on player order, each player will have a 1 size ship out onto the board already loaded with a size 3 cargo. And as I said, the game takes place over 3 rounds. You basically play out a round until all of the dice have been chosen on the action table. And then the player with the best performing stock of their personal company is going to get awarded the Managing Director Award for that round. I should also mention that each player starts with 4 dice of their color in the warehouse and dice pool areas. And these are the areas that you're going to be loading dice from as cargo onto the different contracts and eventually onto ships to be sent through the canal. Now, one thing to notice about these 2 areas is the warehouse is going to cost you $5 per die at the end of each round for each die that's sitting there, whereas the dice pool is going to cost you $0 at the end of the round. And you can notice, depending on where your cargo is sitting on ships throughout the canal, it's going to cost you, for example, here $1 per die or even $3 per die. So this is something you really got to keep in mind in the game, is where you at with loading cargo, where the cargo's sitting. You don't want to have any cargo sitting in your warehouse or even on contracts, because that's going to cost you the most amount of money as sort of a penalty, service fee, if you will, from round to round. So that's a big part of the game, and sort of that, it's almost like a bottleneck thing that's going to happen as you load up ships. Then you really need to get the ships through to the other side, or get them in a position where they're not going to cost you as much money at the end of the round if you can't, deliver them all the way. But then all those free dice that are in the dice pool are going to move into the warehouse at the end of the round for the next round. So now you've got this new set of cargo to worry about. So it's like this cargo is always coming in and always coming in, and you've got to do your best to move it along. And one of the key parts of the game is sort of like cooperating with players, loading your cargo onto their ships, their cargo onto your ships, and vice versa, so you can get stuff moved through. It's definitely not a cooperative game. It's sort of a mutual kind of agreement game, at least temporarily. And there are some interesting things that you've got to keep watch of based on how the cargo cards come out and things like that. And that's the kind of thing that's going to take a few plays before you can really kind of chew on. The mechanics themselves, hopefully by seeing here, you'll see, are not super difficult. I mean, the rule book is a lot to digest, first of all, but once you digest it, you're like, oh, okay, I take a die, do the action, load some cargo, move some ships, no big deal. But then the implications and ramifications of that, they can be pretty serious, in terms of the money and how much money that your company is going to have or not have at the end of the round. Players will also get dealt 2 of the financial advisor cards, and these are endgame bonus cards. You decide to keep one of these, you put one back under the deck, and you can acquire these more throughout the game through different actions. So let's take a look at the loading cargo action. You can see here, let's say the current player wants to take this 5 die, they'll take the die, and then they're going to take the cargo contract associated with that column. You can see here they can load up to 3 cargo because they took the die that was on top of the 3 multiplier. That means they get the contract and they can load 3 cargo. Now players will start the game with 1 contract, and that's done by a quick pre-game draft. And then as you acquire the contracts, you're going to place dice from the warehouse or the dice pool onto these contracts, matching the numbers. So we've got a 5 and a 2 pip dice here, and a 4 and a 3 pip dice on the Eastern contract, which we just acquired. Now if you notice, you've got the Eastern flag and the European flag here, and this indicates where we have to load the cargo onto. Now players can also, if they choose, flip the contracts over, and this will show either 1 or 2 spaces where you can load a cargo of size 3, and these are generic cargo. You can load these onto boats anywhere. And that's something you don't want to be afraid to do once in a while in the game. One example of this is, like, let's say you had a bunch of cargo on a Chinese contract, but there were no boats there, and the boats that are moving through the canal to get to that side of the board, maybe they're gummed up in the works, there's not a lot of movement that round, so you're going to be stuck with this cargo on the Chinese contract, and that's going to cost you more at the end of the round to pay the fees for. So you got to be somewhat open to choosing the generic cargo. However, the game sort of coaxes you into choosing the region-specific cargo because you get some bonuses. So let's talk about how that's going to work. So if you remember from our action, we're allowed to load now 3 cargo. And let's say, for argument's sake, we're going to load 2 cargo off the European contract, and then we'll do 1 off of the Eastern US contract. If we go and look at that region of the board, you can see we have 4 generic ships here. We've got 2 military ships, 1 in each section, and those are indicated by the red axis, which means they're not accepting cargo, they're not accepting passengers. These are military ships that you can move through the canals. And we also have 2 cruise liners. And you can see these only accept dice with size 1 or 2 pips on them. And these will move once there's 2 dice on there. So we'll go ahead and put our size 2 from the European contract onto Lucky Me Cruises. But now we've got nowhere to place our 4 and 5 pip dice. How do we fix this situation? Well, if you remember, we start the game with 1 size 2 ship already pre-built, so we can load that anywhere we want. It doesn't take an action, so you can always just load a ship out. And you move that into the European side, so we can put our 5 die on it that we got off the European contract. Now this ship will move when we have either 5 to 11 pips showing on the die. So we could now move this ship if we wanted, or we could try to load some more contracts on it, or somebody else could load more cargo onto it. And where does that leave us with the 4 pip cargo? Well, if you remember, we have 2 boats on our company board that we can buy. And so it doesn't take an action to buy these, we just do it whenever it's convenient. In this case, we'll go ahead and spend $5 of company money, build the ship, and then we'll go ahead and throw that down into the eastern US where our 4 came from, and then we have now loaded a ship and it's ready to go. So now that we've cleared a European contract, we're going to get a bonus marker and we're going to place that onto our player board. And each player has a slightly different company board. You've got 4 rows for the European, Eastern US, China, and Western US. And as you get these bonus markers, you're going to cover up these different spaces. And you can see there's some iconography here. Some of these will let you take stock actions, give you extra movement, give you extra load actions and things like that. So you're really driven to cover up this board and get lots of little bonus actions. So that's how you load contracts. Now, the other action you can do when you take the contract die is you could take it, but leave the contract card up there and just load cargo based on where that die was positioned, or you can just take that die and pass. And that might be an okay play once in a while, because again, you've got to be cognizant of how much cargo you're allowing into the game, because that's going to be more fees at the end of the round if you're not able to manage and get that into either cheaper places along the canal or actually shipped all the way across the board. Now let's go ahead and take a look at movement. And when you take a movement action die, you'll take it from one of the 3 columns. You always take dice from the bottom of a column. And here you're going to get 2 different types of movement. You can see each column is going to have a dark blue lock movement and then a light blue waterway movement. So in this case, we take the 2 die, we're going to get 2 lock movement and 2 waterway movements. And there's a nice indicator at the top of the board that you can use to keep track of how you move stuff, because you might kind of, second guess yourself and change your mind. So you can use to track how much movement you've spent. And you're going to spend these movements forming groups of ships, hopefully mostly with your cargo on it, and then pushing them through and spending those movement points that you've allotted. Now, as you move these into larger areas, you're going to arrange the ships however you want, but then as you get into these different locks, then you can group ships up into basically size 4, and as ships move in, they're going to actually push other ships in front of them along. Now, as you deliver ships, you're going to get different bonuses and payouts and things depending on the type of ship that you deliver. The main types of ships you're going to be delivering are the player ships, and the owner of that ship is going to get a different card based on the size of the ship. So in this case, the black player will get a captain card or $2. Captain cards have a different amount of generic movement that you can use on a later turn. The yellow player, in this case for their 2 size ship, is going to get a stevedore card, and those allow you to either load some extra cargo or actually reduce the fees paid at the end of the round. Finally, the yellow player again here for the size 3 ship is going to get an additional financial advisor card, and again that's going to be another endgame bonus that they can have. You're also going to pay out the players for the cargo. So whoever had the cargo on there is going to get $1 for each pip into the company supply. Next, you have the cruise ships, and these are interesting because they're going to award passenger tokens. And passenger tokens are going to pay out in a decreasing amount. The first player to deliver a passenger ship is going to get $5 for that token, and then on down to 4, 3, then 2, then 1. Now, as you get these passenger tokens, there's an area on your company board to get more bonuses. So the first 3 passengers you get, you can cover up these little bonuses here, and they give you some different special abilities. Military ships don't give you any reward when you deliver them, but as you move them, you will get $1 in your personal supply for each token up to a maximum of 3 that matches the nationality of that military ship. And finally, you have the San Juan Prospector, which is a special ship. Nobody owns it. Players will get paid out just like their normal player ships, but they get paid out at a multiplier of ×2. But since nobody owns it, no cards are rewarded when it's delivered. So that's the basic part of the game. You either take a die to load cargo, get cargo contracts, or you take a die to do movement and kind of maneuver the ships around. Now there are some bonuses and things like I explained based on placing the flag tokens onto your company board. You get a chance to buy stock, get extra movement, you get the cards which allow you to do extra movement and things. Now there is also what's called an executive action, and those are rare and going to happen towards the end of the round. So let me explain those really quickly. Now, depending how the dice are rolled at the beginning of each round, as these columns are cleared, there may or may not be an executive action die at the top of a column. If there is, you can choose it as long as all the dice underneath it have been chosen, and then you can do the normal action that you could do, like load cargo or move ships, but then you also get the option of manipulating the stock market a little bit. So you have two options. You can bump up your color stock by 2 spaces, or you can buy stock in any company and you pay the amount on the left-hand side of the column, and then you bump up the stock by 1 slot, and then of course you get a share in that stock as well. A couple other things to note: you can also load dice into the train area, and if you can see here on the Eastern card that we bought earlier, this 3 die has to go up into the train area. This will help determine turn order for the next round, as well as give the players in turn order a chance to grab a free flag token and add to their player board. Now there's a couple other things that happen at the end of the round. So you can determine turn order, you got to pay the fees for all the cargo that's out on the board, and what you don't want to have happen is have cargo in the warehouse or on your contracts. That's where you're going to pay the most. You want it either delivered, in which case it goes back to the dice pool and it's free, or you want it in some of the cheaper locks if you can try to manage it. And I have seen, I think one time has happened, I could see as we kind of learn the game where you can kind of push somebody into a more expensive space for like, oh, I can see this is going to break you a little bit, so I'm going to push your ship in closer to being delivered, but it's in a $4 or $3 space or whatever instead of a $1 space. So you got to keep that stuff in mind. Now, what the companies are going to do is then pay out dividends based on the share. So you check the stock market table, and then each player that owns a share in your company is going to get that amount per share. Now, if you can't pay the dividends, you just don't pay any money at all, but your company's stock price is going to drop. So that's something to keep in mind as well. You want to invest in your own company, which is good, but you want to make sure you have the cash to pay that out, because that's going to go again into players' personal store, but you're also going to be paying other players possibly, so that's a pretty interesting idea as well. Now, so what do I think about the game? This is a really interesting game. So a lot of things to talk about here. This is one of those games where you really got to give it a few plays to really get in. Now, I've played it 5 times. I don't normally play a game 5 times before I have to review it. Usually it's 2 or 3 times, because most games aren't as, I'll call it obtuse as this one, but I mean it obtuse in the best possible way, because as we've been playing the game, you really start to unlock different strategies, and it becomes much more deep and robust of an experience than is typical of most Euros that come out nowadays. And the one thing I will mention is that strategy, I feel like, is going to change based on player counts as well. Because, for example, in a 2-player game, you don't have a lot of symbiosis with the other players. 3 and 4 players is pretty close in terms of the play style, but 2 players is very different. Now, I don't think it's bad with 2 players at all. I actually enjoy it with 2 players, but you have to kind of change up gears, I think, into how you think about how you're going to try to win the game. But I really like that, and I would recommend it as a 2-player game. I do prefer it with more players, but I don't think it's because 2 players is bad. It's just, it feels a little bit more natural with multiple players. Now, there's a few other things that are really interesting to me, and it's strange because in some senses I feel like it harkens back to like Steam, Age of Steam style economic Euros from times past. But it has a very modern, little mechanism clockwork thing happening, where you've got the dice and the actions. You've got to be cognizant of which nationalities you're grabbing and which bonuses you're going for. So it has some of those more modern, like approaching point salad thing, approaching combos, like Magic the Gathering, like you get combos and stuff. Doesn't even get there though. It's not a point salad game at all. But I think on first blush I was like, oh, this is gonna be kind of modern Euro, Feldy. Not really, but it's not. It's a brutal economic Euro with interesting mechanics on top of that layered in that you can really chew on and everything. So I think it's a bit of an achievement in that regard, where you talk a lot about hybrid games where it's like Eclipse is a hybrid Ameritrash and Euro game, or a hybrid Ameritrash economic game. This is like a hybrid old school Euro and a hybrid new school Euro, where you've got more player interaction like some of the older school Euros have, a little bit more economic vibe, a little bit more brutality, a little bit more depth than some of the more modern Euros, but it has some of the cool, interesting, just little, dials you can turn in terms of the mechanics and things. And the production is great and everything. The money sucks. It's the Martin Wallace money, so that's fine. But it's kind of funny because everything else is really good and really good. I'm like, oh, this money's awful. I hate this money. It's the worst money ever. But it's Martin Wallace money, so whatever. So it's got nice player aids and stuff that come with the box. I like the differences that are subtle with the different companies. I'm just kind of talking about things now. I do like the cool thing about the passenger tokens. You can kind of go after those early and get some of those passenger bonuses, get the good, better paying passengers, and it gives you something to do with your 1 or 2 dice, whereas you want to use your 6s and your 5s for delivering, the big cargo on the big ships, or throwing that onto the San Juan where you get double the price and everything. So it's cool because it has like just enough little combo-y things where it doesn't feel like it's just a smorgasbord of combos. It's got enough to tinker with, and those, like I said, the little clockwork mechanics. But again, it's solid. Grab a card, load cargo, ship goods, all that stuff. Very straightforward, and frankly, probably an off-putting theme, I think, on the surface of it, because it's like you're not even shipping goods in an exciting way. You're like squeezing them through a canal, which is like, that's not exciting at all. But it really is a really good game, and I think the mechanics and everything rise up, and create that. And it is a unique theme. Most shipping games aren't like this, so I think it's a very good, interesting approach. And I kind of alluded to this earlier in terms of, I feel like I'm running a shipping yard. There's like cargo coming. I've got to manage it. There's some logistics that are happening, but I don't feel like I'm overly encumbered with a lot of mechanics and boring logistics. I've got stuff I've got to do, and I'm in and I'm out. So really is an excellent game. I think a lot of Euro folks are really going to like this. And I think if you've got a good teacher, some folks that aren't used to like a heavier Euros, we'll be able to get into this very quickly, as long as somebody at the table has digested the rules and gone like that. So anyway, so that's Panamax. Take a look. Thanks.